Here is a strange fact about your life. Every experience you will ever have, every single one, happens while you are alive. That sounds obvious, but it has a consequence that philosophers have been fighting about for 2,300 years. It means there is exactly one event in your future that you will never, ever experience: your own death. Around 300 BC, a Greek philosopher named Epicurus wrote a letter to a friend. In it, he made an argument so simple and so infuriating that we still have not finished arguing about it. The argument goes like this: everything good and everything bad in your life comes down to experience: pleasure, pain, joy, fear. If something can never be experienced, it can never actually be good or bad for you. Now think about death. While you exist, death has not arrived. And when death arrives, you no longer exist. There is no moment, anywhere, where you and your death are in the same room. So death, Epicurus concluded, is nothing to you. Being afraid of it makes about as much sense as being afraid of what happened before you were born. Sit with that for a second, because your gut is probably screaming that something is wrong here. Of course death is bad. Of course it makes sense to fear it. Everyone knows that. But here is the problem. Knowing an argument is wrong and showing where it goes wrong are two very different things. Every premise Epicurus uses seems true. You really will never experience being dead. Bad things really do seem to require someone to experience them, and yet the conclusion feels absurd. When every step of an argument looks solid but the conclusion looks insane, you have a philosophical crisis on your hands. It took over 2,000 years for someone to mount the counterattack that most philosophers now take seriously. In 1970, a philosopher named Thomas Nagel published a paper with the world's least dramatic title. It was just called Death. Nagel attacked the weakest beam in the structure: the idea that something can only be bad for you if you experience it. Really? Imagine your friends mock you viciously behind your back every day. You never find out. You never feel a single moment of hurt. Has nothing bad happened to you? Or imagine a brilliant scientist suffers a brain injury and is reduced to the mind of a contented infant. She is happy. She experiences no loss. But we look at her and we see a tragedy. The badness is not in what she feels. It is in what she was deprived of. That is Nagel's move. It is called the deprivation account. Death is not bad because of what it feels like. Death is bad because of what it takes away. All the experiences, projects, and days you would have had. A person who dies at 20 is deprived of more than a person who dies at 90. That is why one death strikes us as more tragic than the other, even though neither person experiences being dead. Deprivation does not need a witness, it just needs a victim. Round two to Nagel, it looks like the puzzle is solved. It is not, because the deprivation account has a crack in it. And when you push on that crack, things get weird. If death is bad because it deprives you of a future, then deprivation must belong to someone. There has to be a you that loses something. But now consider all the people who were never born at all. The children you could have had but did not. Every possible person who never made it into existence. They are missing out on an entire life. Deprived of everything, by any measure. So are they victims too? Is it a tragedy, trillions of times over, every moment of every day? Almost nobody believes that. It sounds ridiculous. But then what is the difference? Why does deprivation count when it happens to someone who once existed, but not when it happens to someone who never did? The dead person is not around to be deprived. The unborn person is not around to be deprived. If one of them can be a victim without existing, why not the other? Suddenly, the deprivation account needs a line between the non-existence that matters and the non-existence that does not. And 50 years on, philosophers still cannot agree on where that line goes, or whether it can be drawn at all. And notice what has happened here. We started with a question about death, but we have ended up somewhere stranger. We are now asking who counts as someone. When exactly harm needs a victim, whether you can lose a thing you were never around to lose. There is one more twist. Even if Nagel is right, even if death is a genuine harm, Epicurus can still ask one final question. Fine, he might say. Call it a harm. But when does this harm happen to you? Not while you are alive. You have not lost anything yet. Not after you die. There is no you for it to happen to. Nagel's harm is real, but it seems to float outside of time entirely. A misfortune with a victim but no date. A bad thing that happens to no one, at no time, in no place. That is what the fear of death is pointing at. Maybe the fear is still rational anyway. Maybe some harms do not need a when. Or maybe Epicurus was right all along. And the oldest fear in the world is a 2,300-year-old bug in human thinking that we simply cannot switch off. Philosophy has not settled this. Not in 23 centuries. But here is the question to take with you. If nobody can tell you when death harms you or how or where, and the fear remains completely untouched by every argument against it, what exactly is it that you are afraid of?